One of the hallmarks of modern web applications, if you've used the web at all recently, you've probably noticed that there's a lot of great animation and effects on these modern web pages. And it used to be that you had to use plugins to achieve a lot of these animation effects. Well, jQuery makes providing animation and effects easy to users of your site. And in fact, in many cases, you can do some pretty neat things with just one or two lines of code. And that's going to be the subject of this chapter. So, the jQuery library, as I noted, supplies some basic animation and effects functions to create some visual effects that are pretty common in modern web pages, such as showing and hiding elements, fading elements in and out, moving them around on the screen. There's also a basic animation function that you can use to build your own animation effects, and we will see how to do that later on in the chapter. But first, let's just get started with some really simple animation, and that involves showing and hiding elements. So, showing and hiding elements are probably one of the most simple effects that you can use in jQuery, and you can exercise some pretty nice control over how elements are shown or hidden. They can happen immediately or over a specified duration of time, and you can see in the table there's a series of functions you can use. So, not surprisingly, the show functions show elements, the hide functions hide elements, and then there's a set of toggle functions, and these basically do what you'd imagine. They show something if it's hidden, and they hide something if it's shown. And there's a couple of different ways of doing each one of these. The most basic show function simply displays each one of the elements that come back from a selector if they're hidden, and that just shows them. The next version, though, allows you to specify the speed with which things happen, and you can either pass a string like slow, normal, or fast, or you can pass a number which is a millisecond duration. So 2000 milliseconds would be 2 seconds. And there's an optional callback that you can have jQuery call when the animation has become complete. So, for example, when an element is finished showing, if you want to do some other UI changes, you can supply a callback function that will be notified when the effect is done. And the same thing for hide. There's the speed and callback function. And same thing here with toggle, the speed and callback. And this one here, the switch, basically you pass true or false, and it either hides or shows everything based upon whether they're hidden or shown. So now that we've seen what some of the functions are, let's jump over to the code and try some of these out. So here I am in the browser, and you can see I've got a nice big blue div, and I've got some buttons down here that trigger some functions. So it's currently visible, so if I click show, nothing happens. But if I click hide, you can see that the element goes away. If I click show, it brings it back. And if I click toggle, toggle just does the opposite of whatever it currently is. That's pretty basic. Now let's look at the code to see how that's happening. Okay, so I'm going to bring this up in my editor. Before we look at the code, let's just take a look at the design view. So here's the design view. You can see here's the element, that's the div, and here are the various buttons. So let's go to the source. So down here in the source, this is the div right here, and here are each one of the buttons. And the buttons have various IDs on them. And up here, you can see that the div has a style sheet applied to it that has some appearance. And up here in the script, you can see that when the browser loads the page, I'm assigning some click handlers to each one of the buttons. So the show button gets the show function, the hide button gets the hide function, and so on. So what I'm doing here is passing various parameters to the function. So for example, for show, I'm passing in a speed of normal, but I can also pass in a speed of something like slow, right? And if I go back to the browser, okay, now refresh. I'm going to hide it, and now when I click show, you can see it comes in a little bit slower. I can actually slow that down a lot more. Let's go back to the code. So instead of passing slow, what I'll do is I'll pass in a duration of 5 seconds, and I'll pass in a callback that tells me that the animation is complete. And for the callback, I'll just say alert done showing. So let's go go back, save. Let's go back to the browser. Let's refresh. Now I'm going to hide it. And now when I click show, you see it comes in very slowly over 5 seconds. And there's my alert that says, hey, all done showing. That's pretty much it for hiding and showing elements. Let's look now at how we would fade elements in and out, another very common effect.